Hello Fanatics. Welcome to True Crime Storytime. A big apology to all of you who follow my True Crime Storytime. It has been a bit of a manic time for me and I've missed 2, maybe 3 weeks, but I promise I'm going to make it up to you. I have lots of stories lined up. I've done quite a bit of research and I'm getting back onto it. So, a whole lot has been going on with me and I'm back doing my true crime story time. I love doing them. You love listening to them. So, here we are. So this week, I want to talk about Henry Lee Lucas. I was doing another case and it reminded me of him. So I'm going to cover him first and then Holmes in next week's episode. So thank you for joining me. Grab whatever project you are working on. Let me know what that project is in the comments. And let's dive into Henry Lee Lucas. He is a well-known name in the true crime world for several reasons. This one has always intrigued me because from memory alone, he was charged with the murder of his mother and then went on to become very, very strange. So, so Henry Lee Lucas, I'm just going to call him Lucas for the sake of that. So he was born on the 23rd of August in 1936. He was an American convicted serial killer and he was convicted of murdering his mother in 1960 and the murder of 2 others in 1983. However, he rose to infamy as a serial killer after he confessed to around 600, not 600 other murders after his conviction while in prison to the Texas Rangers and other law enforcement officials. Many unsolved cases were closed based on the confessions and officially attributed the murders to Lucas. He was considered the most prolific serial killer in history. Lucas was convicted of murdering 11 people and condemned to death for a single case, with then an unidentified victim later identified as Deborah Jackson. An investigation by the Dallas Times-Herald newspaper showed that many of the murders Lucas confessed to were flatly impossible for him to have committed. While the Rangers defended their work, a follow-up investigation by the Attorney General of Texas concluded that Lucas was a fabulist who falsely confessed. Lucas's death sentence was commuted to life in prison in 1998. Lucas himself recanted the confessions as a hoax, except that of his mother. He died of congestive heart failure in 2001. Lucas's case damaged the reputation of the Texas Rangers and caused a re-evaluation in police techniques and greater awareness of the possibility of false confessions. Investigators did not consider that the trivial comforts such as steak dinners, milkshakes, and access to television in return for, quote, confession to crimes of an extreme seriousness might encourage prisoners such as Lucas, who had little to lose, to make false confessions. Investigators also let Lucas see the case files so he could, quote, refresh his memory, making it easy to seemingly demonstrate knowledge of the facts that only the perpetrator would know. The police also did not record their interviews, making it impossible to know for sure how much information interviewers accidentally gave Lucas unprompted. So let's dive back into Henry's, or Lucas as I'm calling him here, but his early life. So Lucas was born in a one-room log cabin in Blacksburg, Virginia. He lost an eye at the age of 10 after it became infected subsequent to a fight with his brother. A friend later described Lucas as a child who would often get attention by displaying frighteningly strange behaviour. His mother, Viola, was a prostitute who would force her son to watch her engaging in sex with clients, and who would make him cross-dress in public. She would then reportedly pimp him out to men and women alike. Eventually, Lucas' schoolteachers complained about the cross-dressing, and a court order put an end to it. So they put a court order on the mum to stop cross-dressing him, but didn't take him out of the home. Okay. In December 1949, it's easy for me to say that because I know where this goes, but yeah. Anyway, in December 1949, Lucas's alcoholic father, Anderson Lucas, died of hypothermia after going home drunk and collapsing outside during a blizzard. Shortly thereafter, while in the 6th grade, Lucas dropped out of school and ran away from home, drifting around Virginia. He claimed to have committed his first murder in 1951, when he said he strangled 17-year-old Laura Burnsley after she refused his sexual advances. As with most of his confessions, Lucas later retracted this claim. On the 10th of June 1954, Lucas was convicted on over a dozen counts of burglary in and around Richmond, Virginia, and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He escaped in 1957 and was recaptured 3 days later, and was subsequently released on the 2nd of September in 1959. In late 1959, Lucas travelled to Michigan to live with his half-sister Opal. Around this time, he was engaged to marry a pen pal with whom he had corresponded with while incarcerated. While Lucas's mother visited him for Christmas, she disapproved of her son's fiancé and insisted he move back to Blacksburg to take care of her as she grew older. When he refused, they argued repeatedly. These arguments escalated until the 11th of January 1960, when, according to Lucas, she struck him over the head with a broom, at which point he stabbed her in the neck. Lucas then fled the scene. He subsequently said, quote, "All I remember was slapping her alongside the neck, but after I did that I saw her fall and decided to grab her, but she fell to the floor, and when I went back to pick her up, I realised she was dead. Then I noticed that I had my knife in my hand and she had been cut." End quote. Opal returned later and discovered their mother alive, but in a pool of blood. She called an ambulance, but it arrived too late. The official police report stated that Lucas's mother died of a heart attack, followed by the assault. Lucas was soon arrested in Ohio on outstanding Michigan warrant. He claimed to have killed his mother in self-defense, but his claim was rejected and he was sentenced to up to 40 years imprisonment in Michigan for second-degree murder. After serving 10 years in prison, he was released in June 1970 due to prison overcrowding. In 1971, Lucas was convicted of attempting to kidnap 3 schoolgirls. While serving a 5-year sentence for the crime, he established a relationship with a family friend and a single mother who had written to him. They married on his release in 1975, but he left the marriage 2 years later after his stepdaughter accused him of sexually abusing her. Lucas began moving between various relatives, one of whom got him a job in West Virginia. I'm not going to sing. Where he established a relationship that ended when his girlfriend's family confronted him about another abuse allegation. Lucas befriended Otis Toole and settled in Jacksonville, Florida. There he lived with Toole's parents and became close to his adolescent niece, Frida, known as Becky Powell, who had a mild intellectual disability and had escaped from a juvenile detention centre. A period of stability followed, with Lucas working as a roofer, fixing neighbours' cars and scavenging scrap. Becky was put in a state shelter by the authorities after her mother and grandmother died in 1982. Lucas convinced her to run away with him and they lived on the road, eventually travelling to California, where an employer's wife asked them to work for her infirm mother, 82-year-old Kate Rich. However, Kate's family turned the couple out, accusing them of failing to do their jobs and writing check on Kate's account. While hitchhiking, Lucas and Becky were picked up by a minister of a religious commune called the House of Prayer, located in Stonesburg, Texas. Believing that Lucas and the 15-year-old Becky were a married couple, the minister found Lucas a job as a roofer while allowing the couple to stay in a small apartment on the commune. Becky became argumentative and homesick for Florida. When she turned up absent, Lucas claimed that she left at a truck stop in Bowie, Texas. In June 1983, Lucas was arrested on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm by Texas Ranger Phil Ryan. Later, he confessed to the murders of Becky and Kate Rich and led the police to their remains. Although forensic evidence alone was inconclusive and the coroner stopped short of positively identifying either of them, Lucas's participation in the investigation would serve to boost his credibility in confessions to other crimes. Lucas later denied involvement, but the consensus agrees that he did murder Becky and Kate Rich. In November 1983, Lucas was transferred to a jail in Williamson County in Texas. He reported that he attempted suicide after receiving rough treatment by the inmates and claimed that the police stripped him naked, denied him cigarettes and bedding, held him in a cold cell, tortured his genitalia, and did not allow him to contact an attorney. In interviews with law enforcement personnel, Lucas confessed to numerous additional unsolved killings. It was thought that there was positive corroboration with Lucas's confessions in 28 unsolved murders, and so the Lucas Task Force was established by James B. Adams, the director of the Texas Department of Public Safety. The Lucas Task Force officially cleared 213 previously unsolved murders as a result of Lucas's confession. Lucas received preferential treatment that was extremely lax for someone supposedly thought to be a cunning mass murderer. He was frequently taken to restaurants and cafes, rarely handcuffed, allowed to wander police stations and jails, and he even knew codes to security doors. Later attempts at determining Lucas's involvement in the confessed crimes were complicated. When it was discovered he was given access to information on the files of the cases he was confessing to. And we all know that, let's just say, a body has been found and they were strangled. It could be with string, it could be with rope, but we wouldn't know that because the police hold that back, hoping that the killer would walk in and say, oh, well, I did it with rope. And they'll be like, no, you didn't do it because it wasn't rope. We all know they do that. But they're showing him the files and saying, did you do this one? And he's like, yeah, I did. There were suggestions that the interview tapes showed that Lucas would read the reactions of those interviewing him and alter what he was saying, thereby making his confessions more consistent with facts known to law enforcement. The most serious allegation against the Lucas Task Force is that they had let Lucas read case files on unsolved crimes and thus enabled him to come up with convincingly detailed confessions, which made it virtually impossible to determine if he had been telling the truth about a relatively large number of the murders. In 1983, Lucas claimed to have killed an unidentified young woman, later identified as Michelle Busher. I'm going to go with Busher. Along Interstate 90 in Minnesota. When questioned by police, he gave inconsistent details on the way he murdered the victim and was eliminated as a suspect. In 1984, he confessed to the murder of an unidentified girl referred to at the time as Caledonia Jane Doe, who was discovered shot to death in a field in Caledonia, New York, on the 10th of November in 1979. Investigators, however, found insufficient evidence to support Lucas's confession. In early 2015, over 35 years later, Caledonia Jane Doe was identified through a DNA match as Tammy Alexander. Lucas is also believed to have falsely confessed to the 1980 slaying of Carol Cole in Louisiana. She was also unidentified until 2015. Journalist Hugh Ainsworth and others investigated the veracity of Lucas's claims for articles that appeared in the Dallas Times Herald. They calculated that Lucas would have had to use his 13-year-old Ford station wagon to cover 11,000 miles, which is 17,700 kilometres, in 1 month to have committed the crimes the police attributed to him. After the story appeared in April 1985 and revealed the flawed methods of the Lucas Task Force, law enforcement opinion began to turn against their claims that crimes had been solved. The bulk of the Lucas report was devoted to detailed timelines of Lucas's claimed murders. The report compared his claims to be reliable, verifiable sources of his whereabouts. The results often contradicted his confessions and thus cast doubt on most of the crimes in which he was implicated. Texas Attorney General Jim Mattox wrote that, quote, "When Lucas was confessing to hundreds of murders with those custody of Lucas did nothing to bring an end to this hoax. We have found information that will lead us to believe that some officials cleared cases just to get them off their books." End quote. Lucas remained convicted of 11 homicides. He had been sentenced to death for one, a then unidentified woman dubbed as, quote, Orange Socks, whose body was found in Williamson County on Halloween 1979, despite a time sheet recording his presence at work in Jacksonville, Florida on that day. Lucas was granted a stay on his death sentence after it was discovered that details in this confession came from the case file which had been given to him to read. The sentence was commuted to life imprisonment in 1998 by then Governor George W. Bush. In 2019, Orange Socks was officially identified as Deborah Jackson, who was 23 at the time of her death. On March the 12th, 2001, at 11 p.m, Lucas was found dead in prison from congestive heart failure at the age of 64. He is buried at Captain Joe Bird Cemetery in Huntsville, Texas. Since 2012, his grave has been unmarked due to vandalism and theft. I don't understand this because all of us who are here right now are into true crime. And, you know, I get a little bit, I go down a rabbit hole and I spend a couple of months doing nothing but true crime. Either watching it, listening to it, talking about it. But I wouldn't go and take a piece of headstone from a serial killer. I don't see that fascination. I don't get it. Do you get it? Let me know in the comments. Okay, Lucas's credibility was damaged by his lack of precision. He initially admitted to having killed 60 people, a number he raised to over 100, which police just accepted, and then to a figure of 600 that led him to not being taken seriously. Police officers interviewed him for more than 3,000 murder cases, and at least 200 cases were attributed to him. However, he remained publicised as America's most prolific serial killer, despite denials such as flatly stating, quote, "I'm not a serial killer," end quote, in a letter to author Shalady. Some continued to believe, nonetheless, that Lucas was responsible for a massive number of killings. Criminologist Eric Hickey cites an unnamed investigator who interviewed Lucas several times and concluded that he had probably killed about 40 people. Such assertions were given little credence, with lawmen involved refusing to corroborate these claims. An experienced Texas Ranger to whom Ryan's team allowed access to Lucas said that although it was obvious to him that Lucas often lied, there was an instance where he demonstrated guilty knowledge. Quote, "I remember him trying to cop to one he didn't do, but there was another murder case where I'll kiss your butt if he didn't lead us right to the deer stand where the murder took place. Ain't no way he could have guessed that, and I damn sure didn't tell him. I think he did that one," end quote. Other rangers had similar experiences with Lucas. DNA evidence has verified that Lucas did not kill 20 of his supposed victims. So there you go. That is the true crime of Henry Lee Lucas. I think this is why I find it fascinating. You have all these police officers swarming from all over America to interview him, to cross it off their books, and not one of them said, well, hang on, he can't be in one place and then hundreds of miles in another place within hours of each other, killing this person and killing this person. It's just fascinating to me, along with why confess to so many. But on his part, he's in prison for a long time to come, so why not get a burger and a milkshake out of it? It's very bizarre. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below, and yeah, I'm pretty sure you have heard of Henry Lee Lucas before, but I'm very intrigued by this case. I did see it on Netflix, where they interview police officers and everything. It's just bizarre. Not one of them put their heads together and said, well, hang on, you know? But there you go. Investigators at that. It's quite ironic. I have been working on one of my smaller projects. I got this from AliExpress when I first started diamond painting, and I'm just getting around to doing them. So, yeah, I time-lapsed it. It's not my natural speed. Some of you go, cool, you diamond paint really fast. I wish I was this fast. But no, it is time-lapsed. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing it come to life. She's nearly done. Yay. So that's another one done for 2022. But there you go. as always, thank you so much for spending time with me. I really do appreciate it. I do appreciate the comments and the interaction on my true crime story time. I love your perceptions of things, so please do share them. And I shall see you very soon. Thank you so much for being here with me on my true crime story time. I will try not to leave you too long. Apologies if you have missed me. As always, stay safe out there. Bye.